So a few more joiners. If you are just joining us, big welcome. Please do introduce yourself in the chat and your role and involvement with data. It'd be lovely to hear where you're coming from. So let me. So if you, I don't know if any of you with my AI talk last week, if you were, that was very practical, hands-on, trying to show you the art of the possible. Today's a little bit more me talking at you and asking questions that I'm hoping is going to get you thinking and getting you wondering about the role of data and AI and other things within your charity. So there'll be split this into two parts. I'm very happy to answer any questions and really love your feedback on whether you agree with me, disagree with me. Does it resonate what I share and what I say this afternoon? It's a little bit different from the type of presentations and talks I've done before. So please be gentle with me, but I'd really love your honest feedback and opinions on what I say. Hi, Anna. Welcome from Camp Care. So why the way we think about fundraising data is dead wrong. So this is not a talk about AI. It's more a talk, not a talk about systems or particular CRMs or dashboards. It's more about a talk about culture, about thinking, and about whether our sector is really finally ready to unlock the potential that just felt out of reach for too long, really. So I'm not here with all the answers today. I'm here, I guess, more with an invitation to reimagine how we work with data, an invitation to demand better from ourselves, from our organisations, and from suppliers to the sector as well. But it's an invitation to build together, rooted in confidence, curiosity, and community. Because if we do get it right, I think the next 5, 10 years could be the most exciting breakthrough for fundraising since sort of relationship fundraising was first imagined back in the 1990s. So I want to start with a bit of a hard truth, really, from working with lots of charities. I can see Lynn here. Lynn and I work together with Samaritans on some projects. We don't have a data problem per se. We often have a culture problem. We tend to work in silos that really shouldn't exist. So you might have heard things like, data's with the CRM team, or insight sits with the analysis, or fundraisers don't need access to that, or IT doesn't want to connect those systems. We've sort of created this world where fundraisers feel shut out of their own information and where the people who need insight and the insight to do your job are the least confident of asking for it and using it. And it's not anyone's fault. It's not fundraisers, it's not IT, it's not data team. I get it's this cultural issue I think we have that we're not working together and not seeing data as everyone's business. But supporters don't see silos. Supporters don't care which team owns the data. They expect us to know them, understand them, remember them. And we can't do that unless we build cultures where fundraisers feel confident to ask, how could we do this quicker? What would happen if we combine these two data sets? Could technology help us understand our supporters better? What's possible? If we don't change that culture, no amount of AI will save us. And after this, I'll send you a link to a guide we created around how might you create that great data culture. So this talk is in two parts. I'm going to start with the art of the possible and what we could have as a sector and examine why we don't. I'll end with how we change it, and then we'll have a little break for questions. And then I'm going to share sort of three big ideas, three moonshots, I'm calling them, for fundraising and data that we might be able to work about. So as I go through, feel free to ask questions and put comments in the chat. I'd love to know what you're thinking, if you're agreeing with me, disagreeing with me. got ideas of your own, it'd be really brilliant to hear them. So this storyboard is my biggest frustration, I guess. While we're stuck in this paralysis and the art of the possible is sort of it's already gone. And I said I'm going to talk about moonshots, but let's get into the nitty gritty of sort of day to day. There's so much that is possible now. Open systems, APIs that connect everything, automations that remove manual tasks, AI that drafts personalized comms that we then review with humans, real-time dashboards, instant analysis, dynamic budgets, integrated journeys across channels. I guess goes on and on the list. In the AI talk I did last week, I used Google's Gemini. I was able to create a fully mapped wireframe website for a charity in under 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes later, I had five versions of a potential homepage for a campaign. The cost of that was probably half an hour of my time and a £20 per month subscription. So we can go from a blank page to something a fundraising team could see, could react to in the time it takes to make a coffee. And this is not some futuristic tech. This is happening today. And I guess what gets me most excited about this art of the possible and data, I guess the first time in decades, we can really deliver true relationship fundraising at scale. We've now got the tools. Ken Burnett painted the vision, but we didn't have the ability to do it, or it was too expensive, or took too much time. Things were too disconnected or too complex. But we've got everything we need if, and this is the big if, we can choose to use it and create the systems where we can use it. So let's look how we got to this position. I think first of all, there's a chronic underinvestment in CRM, insight, and training and development around data structures, CRMs, etc. It feels like at times we're running in 2026 missions on infrastructure from the early 2000s and 2010s. I was with a charity the other week that's still got a server in a cupboard with all the fans whirring and things. And the some of the tech stacks that we use are really behind the times compared to it. And I think innovation in our systems has been really slow and glacial. We still tolerate CRMs that can't talk to other systems, break when you add a new field, require manual imports, and sort of force fundraisers into walkarounds. And we've sort of internalized that as normal. But the art of the possible has changed. It's now feasible to build products, processes, and insights that would have been unthinkable even, I don't know, 5 years ago. And I know because I've done this and I've seen it. 20 years ago when I was working at Sue Ryder, we worked on this amazing project. We had a great team of consultants helping us and supporting us. And he was project mapping supporters and where they were clustered around shops and care services and communities. Really sort of cutting edge stuff using statistical tools and all sorts of things. It took 6 months to do and it cost, I can't remember the exact cost, but around about £25,000 of time. Money well spent, got some really great insight. Um, but I could now do that project. In fact, I did do a project for a client. It was essentially the same thing, using AI as my analytical assistant, using model tools, and it took me under a day and cost less than £50. And I guess that's the gap that we're dealing with. The cost of insight has collapsed, but the friction around insight hasn't, and the costs haven't come down to reflect the realities of what's possible, what can do. And I don't think that's acceptable, really. But we're not just under investing. I think we've got a project about, do we really understand and know what does great look like? Again, going back to that time, I remember going around and visiting a few charities who were meant to be like leading the way on CRMs and data, and they're doing some really good stuff, but there's still so much manual intervention and processes. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference. There was a session, the project that the speakers were talking about was the Data and Insight Project of the Year. So I was really curious to see what it was like. It was a really good, well thought out project. It really delivered some strong outcomes. But then I remember someone putting their hand up and saying, "Oh, this is amazing! How did you automate all this?" And then the speaker sort of said, "Oh no, no, oh, Dobby said we didn't automate it. That'd have been great. We couldn't do that. That we built spreadsheets and stitched together things manually." So the project achieved its goals. The insight and the thinking behind it was brilliant. But should a project that's reliant on manual intervention really be held up as the number one sector's top award? If we're still doing that, is that really our gold standard? And do we need to try and raise the bar a bit? So it's not just data. I've seen it in fundraising innovation and awards and products. There was a probably 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago now. There was a wave of subscription products, for example. They were innovative, they were clever, they won lots of awards. But I know from talking to fundraisers who worked on them that the long-term results weren't great. The retention wasn't brilliant on these, and they were actually losing money. But these were held, the standard. We copy it, we celebrate it, we share it at conferences. But are these things actually working, and are we being honest and sharing our full results? So we're not necessarily standing on the shoulder of giants, and we're learning from examples that may not have worked but did win awards. And that's not because people are doing bad work. It's because sometimes we get distracted by the shiny and new rather than the tried and tested. And we need to celebrate innovation, but also measure its impact. And we need to also be willing to share our results. I think the sector generally is really good and really generous sharing. But all the while we need to realize when we copy something, have we got the full context? Because we might be missing out on something. And then just generally, the cost of computing's collapse, the cost of insights is pushing people as far as well. Oh, the sound keeps dropping off. Oh, sorry about that. Um, if that keep, let me just try. If it keeps happening, let me know if it happens again, and I'll switch microphones. But thank you for letting me know. Really appreciate that. So I've got a challenge to suppliers, really, and I include myself in this. Is how do we demand more from our suppliers and vendors? If CRMs remain closed systems, if our platforms block integration, if IT policies treat 2025 tools like, 2010 security risks, then nothing will change. If you're old like me, you might remember in the 80s, Ronald Reagan at the Brandenburg Gate and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, you know, open it up, liberate Eastern Europe. I'm not saying we're tearing down the Berlin Wall here, but I do think we need to say, suppliers, open your systems, give us APIs as standard. Let's be able to connect the tools our fundraisers actually use and stop locking down our data like it's polonium. So, I see a couple of comments already about spreadsheets. How do we get rid of that spreadsheet culture? You're going to keep spreadsheets as long as you don't trust systems or don't have the ability to get the data back out of systems in the way that you need. The commercial world just won't stand for this. They'd be like, no, we're moving, but it's expensive and charities don't necessarily have the budget, and sometimes we get stuck with systems that aren't fit for purpose. But things like Salesforce, commercial world demands these connections and being able to plug different things in. But how many charities are also demanding the same and insisting that any software they have can talk to their other software that they use? So I'm really big into sort of automation and using tools like Zapier or Make or NA10. I've had so much pushback, not charities not being allowed to use these because of IT policy. That's really holding back our data potential. holding us back. Okay, let me switch. Thank you for letting me know, City. Appreciate that.
Let me know if this is better. And we can, as I said before, the costs have plummeted. Cost of data and insight has plummeted, and we need to elevate our thinking accordingly. We can now write brilliant codes, even if you've never coded before, and that sounds really scary. You don't need to know code to ask AI and things to build things for you, build apps and or analyze a document or a spreadsheet, as long as there's nothing, sensitive or anything that you wouldn't want to share. These things can be done practically free. A supplier, I'm not going to name them, but with one of my clients, they relied on that lack of knowledge and that lack of questioning. They were going to charge my client £2,000 to do something that I knew personally was under an hour's work. And, I called them out on it, and said, you're ripping them off. That's not right. It's not fair. And they backtracked and massively reduced the fee because they've been caught. But there was nobody in that charity realized that because they didn't know the art of the possible and how to solve it really. So absolutely we need to pay suppliers and data experts fairly, but that felt like extortion to me and sort of relying on lack of understanding and fear of data. Um, they just left me feeling a bit cold really. So we need to demand better. Got another fear that I think is costing us big time, and that's GDPR. Again, be interested in the comments to get your thoughts on GDPR. Are you moving to soft opt-in? I really think it's cost our approach to GDPR and using supporters' data has cost us millions. And just to be clear, protecting data, respecting consent, ensuring security and transparency, non-negotiable. Absolutely have to happen. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about this culture of fear that is damaging fundraising. It's a bit like the stuff of nightmares, from Harry Potter, like a dementor sucking the life from fundraising soul. Because we become so scared of getting it wrong that we stop collecting the information that would let us get it right. Donors want us to understand them. They want us to record the stories and information that they freely give, and they expect us to remember them. Because when we don't, it really hurts. We don't want to be in the Daily Mail. I agree, Anna, but we won't be if we get it right. And look what Google keep on us. Look what Meta do. You can look it up. They know everything about us. They can predict things about us before we even know it ourselves. And we're so scared. And yeah, absolutely, yeah, it's driving the fear, but it's wrong because we should be able to stand by what we're doing and why we're doing it. I did a project with a hospice a while ago, and part of that we're interviewing donors, and I spoke to this major donor. He'd given six-figure gifts to the hospice over the years. He loved the hospice, and he was, really profoundly grateful for the care he gave his wife. And he would support them for as long as he was, but he was thinking about stopping. It really broke my heart, actually. He said, Craig, I still care deeply about it, but the reason he was thinking of stopping is he had to keep telling his story and telling fundraisers about his wife dying and being cared for at the hospice every time a new fundraiser joined the team. And it wasn't out of malice, but they had a GDPR policy that wouldn't let them record that donor's story on the database. So every time a fundraiser left, who maybe managed them, and turnover of staff in the sector is another issue for another day, he had to keep telling the same story and over again to people because they weren't allowed to record personal information about family stories. And it was set up with the best of intentions, but the system, the policy didn't allow them to steward it properly, and they didn't allow fundraisers to do their job properly. And a man, given so generously for the greatest of reasons, was thinking of stopping. because the hospice couldn't hold his humanity and couldn't respect his story and listen appropriately. So yeah, cost of getting GDPR wrong is massive. We have to be compliant, we have to be ethical, but let's not be scared of data that users want to use. The next part, again, I've used this example a few times over the years, but I have what we call the pizza problem. If you think about what makes a really great pizza, you can have the best sort of Michelin star quality toppings. You might have the finest homemade tomato sauce. You might have fresh Italian mozzarella. But if your base is soggy, half baked, doughy, the whole thing either collapses or just doesn't taste right and things. And for me, data is our pizza base layer. We can't do all the great toppings and relational fundraising and supporter journeys and experience if we don't get our base right. And so for too many charities, our work, our impact, our stories, they are Michelin star, but our data and CRM is a bit like a 3 a.m. kebab shop pizza that is just this congealed mess. We can dream about AI and having all these systems and all the rest of it, but we can't automate chaos. So none of this really matters if we don't have consistent source codes. If data is a mix of all caps and random abbreviations, if addresses are half formatted, or spreadsheets, as we said, sit on desktops like little data time bombs waiting to go off. So we've got to fix the foundation if we're going to build the future. We've got to have our solid pizza base, which is our data and systems. Hand on heart, I don't think any charity in 2026 should be manually importing data week after week. There's the occasional exception, but we need to try and get out of that cycle of manual importing. Automation's here, integration's possible. I guess the only thing missing is permission and confidence. So I'll share this next bit with you afterwards, but we put together a little bit of, what does this look like? What's the rules of the game, and what's our manifesto for the future of fundraising? And we put together 10 ideas around culture beating technology, about fundraising deserving confidence and not gatekeeping, about making insight accessible, not siloed, about suppliers tearing down the walls, about making open systems, about GDPR protecting donors and not alienating them, about automation, removing fiction, not creating it, AI helping people, not replacing them, being brilliant at the basics, and coming together as a community to help each other. So I've just put those in the chat. So again, this is my last bit of part one before I pause and answer any questions in the comments and all the rest of it. I don't have all the answers, but I'm really curious about the answers. And I guess this is my call to action. If you're curious about this, if you want to experiment, if you've got ideas that you're not being able to bring to life, not talking about perfection here, but making progress and exploring the art of the possible. I think there's a real opportunity right now. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I'm learning, I'm testing, building on things. But I believe some of the tools that are out there now and are available to us all in a cost-effective way means the sector has never had more potential than it does right now to get this right and make a generational improvement in our CRMs, in our data, and in our insights. We can increase loyalty, deepen relationships, understand supporters like never before, free up fundraisers' time to spend more time inspiring and connecting, build those remarkable experiences and wow that I'm really passionate about to unlock hopefully a sort of golden age of fundraising. So if you are interested in this and want to be maybe part of something and challenge and think and build something better, then next week we'll be launching a completely free community where we can come together, share ideas, think about solutions, build something better. Because I really believe that the way we're currently thinking about fundraising data is dead wrong, and it means we've got the chance to maybe get it right if we can come together. So I'm going to pause there. Very happy to answer any questions for now. And then we're going to share three big ideas to finish, three what I'm calling moonshots that I think if we as a sector implemented could really help us all in our fundraising. So, Christopher, are you talking about the fact that charities? I'm not just talking about that. I think that is a really important thing because if you've got the data for impact and what your service colleagues are doing and can show that, then that really does help demonstrate the impact of business donors and supporters. But I'm talking about knowing if you're an individual giving, knowing your second gift rate or your lifetime value of supporters. When I'm talking about insight for corporate, who hasn't given this year that gave last year, what made trust foundation, what they're interested in, and legacy pledges, how many have you got, how many inquirers, how many are converting, what's the length between pledge and get. So all these insights and things that can help you do better fundraising. So yeah, Anna, yeah, agreed on Anna, thanks for the Daily Mail content. Yeah, Lynn, pleased to hear you're working on it. I'd expect nothing less. Silos within fundraising functions and charities as a whole. So making sure the services team are talking with the HR team, depending on your size and your data team, and sometimes it might just be two or three of you, so it's just talking to each other. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, Anna. I won't name names, but a charity I've worked with, they brought in a whole new finance system. It was brilliant, but no one checked that actually their CRM can talk to um the new finance system, and it's just caused as much work as it's solved. Yeah, extracting data, getting that from the program managers, and they're busy. So I get that they're busy, and they think, oh, I haven't got time for that. So how do we clear the path and I guess make it easy, Christabel, to get it? How can we automate it so it just becomes part of what they do? So you don't have to go chasing and asking them for data. You've got access to it. And you, like Anna says, you're connecting things to create data dashboards and things. Yeah, Kerry, I'd love to hear more about that. That sounds really interesting. Yeah. You've got to focus on upskilling and getting people to know it. People get really scared of data. It feels like, oh God, I've got to be really technical or clever or things. You don't, it's about thinking about your day job and how might it help you and how do it. Yeah. Yeah. It is a lot of hard work, absolutely. But I think it's worth doing. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think I agree, Christabel, on GDPR. So cool. So what could we build together? So I'm going to go all JFK here, and back I think it was in 1961. He said, we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And he wasn't talking about a quick win. He was talking about it ended up being 6, 7, 8 years of collaboration. Thousands of minds working towards one impossible thing. If anyone's watched Oppenheimer, you see like how much work and people went into creating the Manhattan Project, the Human Genome Project. Took 13 years, but absolutely revolutionized medicine. They're not solo missions; they're collective ambitions built by people who believed the impossible was, I guess, a problem we haven't yet solved. So I've been thinking with my colleague Daniel, who we run Technology for Good with, what are the moonshots for fundraising and data and insight? And I'm not talking here about curing cancer or ending poverty. That's our sector's purpose. That's what we're down to do here. But I'm talking about infrastructure problems behind the scenes. What are the big issues that if solved, we could unlock fundraisers to do their best work, serve supporters better, build deeper relationships, and grow income at scale. So not accepting the status quo, but trying to build something transformational. So I've got three for you. Be really interesting to know what you think. And it will rely on people coming together across the sector. Could be people like the Resource Alliance or the IOF or NCVO, whoever it might be. But first is, I guess, around AI and back to that, what actually works and not wins awards. Um, how do we create a fundraising brain that all fundraisers could access, that is based on best practice, that is based on insight, that is based on real benchmarks and results, so we can all learn collectively from it and do better fundraising that is accessible to all. We've got the amazing Sophie, which is obviously a global library of tested, proven real world fundraising results. Imagine if we could create an AI built on that, that you could share your fundraising problems with, your ideas with, etc., that's trained on real campaign results, failed experiments, because learning what doesn't work is just as important and valuable, comparing trends, legacy acquisition, looking at things over long time around regular giving, attrition, retention, looking at trust rates over the years, has cultural and demographic context, and create this shared brain that we can all tap into. And this is technically possible, achievable. It just needs the people to be willing. So you could have, someone in Birmingham could ask, what's the average second gift conversion rate for health charities with income under 500,000, and get an answer rooted in real data, not guesswork, not consultant wisdom, not mythology. A fundraiser in Hong Kong could ask, should we invest in legacy marketing, or will, current cost of living suppress response? And we could bring in context and things. So it's about replacing human judgment, arming fundraisers with the truth, operating less on hope and hunch, but on evidence. And if we all came together and contributed to something like this, it could have a transformative effect on the sector. And we could, create global benchmarking, real-time anonymized data commons for the good of us all, where we can test, learn, compare, and build together. So we need things like standard metrics, ethical data governance, sector buy-in. But if we built it, it could be the equivalent of our Human Genome Project, and mapping the fundraising world, and creating benchmarks and other things. So that's Moonshot 1. Second moonshot is around an ethical charity, large learning model, AI, so that AI doesn't inherit society's biases, because there's a big problem with AI that every major LM in the world, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, trained on the internet, and the internet isn't neutral. It contains, centuries of bias around race, gender, religion, ethnicity, disability, socioeconomic class, and those biases tend to come from, with a middle-aged white man like myself, get baked into the models. And then so when we're using those models to write appeals or screen applications and make decisions, we risk, I guess, amplifying some of those very inequalities we exist to fight. So this is my second big idea that I think would be incredible to do. How can we create an ethical version of OpenAI, ChatGPT, that is trained specifically for the charity sector, that actively mitigates bias, that uses diverse, inclusive language, that serves, a whole range of charities, that's transparent and audible, so you understand why it's recommended something, and its own the sector, rather than being controlled by big tech and beholden to like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and others. So it's not just about, writing better appeals or doing something. It's about, I guess, baking in that algorithmic justice into what we do. Because if we're going to use AI to support vulnerable people, systems, survivors of, trauma, refugee, we can't do that if we use systems that carry hidden prejudice. So imagine a world where we grant applications are all screened without unconscious bias, where service users receive communications that respect their identity. Fundraising appeals don't reinforce stereotypes, and recommendation rooted in equity, not algorithmic inheritance. And that'd be a real gift, I think, to the sector. And again, sounds really huge and massive, but is technically feasible. If the right people came into the room and we put our collective mind together, this is doable. So we can build it in and start. And again, I agree. Yeah, help look at how we mitigate the impact on the environment as well. And yeah, completely agree. Because it does have an environmental impact. Though interesting, I read something that ChatGPT uses less than half the water that irrigating golf courses in America does, which is like, it does have an environmental impact, but it also needs to be put in context. And that's not to excuse things because I think data centers do have um, massive things. Sophie's the showcase of fundraising, innovation, and inspiration. Highly recommend it if you're not the Christabel. There's loads of great examples and things on there. Final moonshot, final third big idea. Um, we've got it now on our phones. All phones now have the same universal charger, the USB-C that goes in. What would be our fundraising equivalent of all having the same charger for our CRM, for our donation platforms, for CAF, whatever it might be, Benevity that one's going to eat. How if we made all systems able to talk to each other and they all use standard protocols and ways of doing that, so we don't have these closed systems. So your CRM does talk easily to your email platform, does connect to the finance system. The support data is not being siloed over here. So when you ask for an integration, at the minute they're like you either get charged a fortune, you get told no, we can't do it, it's not on the roadmap, or you have to pay for a developer for 6 months to do something. And again, it's cost our sector millions, not just in costs, but opportunity costs of what could we do with that money instead if we had this standard thing. And I think it's unacceptable really. And I think imagine if we had this universal integration protocol, an open standard that every fundraising tech provider signs up to, APIs as standard, plug and play connectivity, seamless data flows. So almost like I say, that USB, that charging system is the same for everything. So you don't have to have a computer science to connect your email platform to your CRM. You don't have to choose between innovation and stability. You don't get locked into one thing. It drive better. We wouldn't get taken for granted by some of our suppliers. We weren't happy we could move easily, quickly because we're all using the same protocols and connectors. So something that was open source, clear standards, people would be certified that their software meets these standards, and empower charities use the best of breed tools really. And force suppliers to compete on quality and service, not on the quality of their salespeople. It's possible, the commercial world are demanding this. There's something that's been released in the last 3 to 4 months called MCP, which is multiple something protocol, which again is that USB universal plugin for AI. So everyone presents the data in the same way, so things can connect together. So if we did this, we free charities to innovate without asking permission. So there's my three big ideas. Love to hear yours. Love to hear if you've got any observations on that. Did they resonate? Do you agree, disagree? And like I say, we'll be sharing an invite early next week where to talk about some of these in more detail, and would love to get your involvement, input, ideas, and see if we can start solving some of these problems and building anew. So thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, Christabel. Yeah, only implementing the CRM that only integrates with Sage and not Zero. Yeah, so we can't use it. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, that that happens in this day and age, that we're building systems that don't actually talk, so you're creating more work. Oh, hello. Hello. Lovely to hear from you. You sneaked on. I didn't see you sneaking on. Hope you're well. Hope Tulu and the family are well. Amazing to hear from you. I'll reach out to you separately. It'd be lovely to have a catch up. Right. So I'm going to stop the recording and just say a big thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. I realise I've talked at you probably much more than I normally would in the talk, and it's more big picture, but I hope it's resonated and got you thinking and thinking about the art of the possible and how we can build better and build together. So amazing. Thanks for your time today. Have a good rest of the day.